My name is Dalton, 34 years old and doing pretty well for myself in real estate development. Despite my success, family gatherings always make me feel like that insecure kid again, especially around my father Richard. When I offered to pay $7,800 for our annual Hawaii reunion venue, I never expected him to bark, "Skip the family vacation. It's not your place anymore." His words stung. But what happened next changed everything. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and stick around to find out how one canceled payment taught my family the ultimate lesson about respect. I grew up in a modest brick house in a middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. Our home was nothing fancy, but it was well maintained with a small backyard where Dad would grill during summer weekends and Mom would tend to her flower garden. The neighborhood was the kind where kids played in the streets until streetlights came on, and neighbors knew each other by name. It was comfortable, predictable, and safe. My father Richard worked as a district manager for a chain of hardware stores. He was the classic self-made man who took pride in working his way up from a sales associate position right out of high school. Dad never went to college, a fact he simultaneously resented and wore as a badge of honor. "School of Hard Knocks teaches you more than any university," he would often say. Dad ruled our household with unwavering authority. His word was final, and questioning his decisions was seen as disrespect. He managed our family finances with the same rigid control he applied to his store budgets, tracking every dollar spent and requiring justification for any purchase that wasn't absolutely necessary. Mom Karen was a kindergarten teacher who loved her job and her students. She had a natural warmth that made children gravitate toward her. At home, she was the emotional center of our family, the one who soothed hurt feelings and mediated conflicts. But when it came to standing up to Dad, she usually defaulted to keeping the peace rather than challenging him. "Your father just wants what's best for everyone," she would whisper after he'd shut down one of my ideas or criticized my choices. I loved her deeply, but wished sometimes she would take my side more openly. I have two siblings. My older brother Mark followed in Dad's footsteps, working at the same hardware chain and adopting many of his perspectives and management style. Mark was always Dad's favorite, the son who understood the value of hard work and loyalty. My younger sister Jessica took a different path, becoming a nurse and moving to Minneapolis. She was the family peacekeeper, always trying to smooth over tensions between Dad and me. While Mark embodied Dad's practical, no-nonsense approach to life, Jessica inherited Mom's empathy and emotional intelligence. Our relationships were complicated but loving, shaped by our individual ways of coping with Dad's domineering personality. The annual family vacation tradition started when I was 10 years old. After years of saving, Dad proudly announced that we would be spending a week at a small beachside resort in Florida. That first trip was magical for all of us, a rare opportunity to see Dad relaxed and even playful. Mom took dozens of photos, and Jessica collected seashells that she still keeps in a jar on her desk. The vacation was such a success that Dad declared it would become our annual tradition. As the years passed, the destinations became more ambitious: the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, even a cruise to the Bahamas. These trips became the cornerstone of our family identity, the time when disputes were temporarily set aside and we reconnected as a unit. My path diverged from my family's expectations when I announced I wanted to attend college for business and real estate. Dad scoffed at the idea, calling it a waste of money and time. "Real businesses are built through sweat and experience, not textbooks," he insisted. Despite his disapproval, I took out student loans and worked 2 part-time jobs to put myself through school. The strain on our relationship intensified when I moved to Seattle after graduation to work for a commercial real estate developer. In Dad's eyes, I had rejected not just his advice, but his entire way of life. Over the next decade, I built a successful career developing eco-friendly apartment complexes. My projects won awards for innovative design and sustainability, and my financial success far outpaced what I could have achieved following Dad's prescribed path. Each accomplishment seemed to drive a deeper wedge between us, as if my success was a personal affront to him. During family gatherings, he would dismiss my work as getting lucky or playing with other people's money, never acknowledging the hard work and risk-taking that fueled my achievements. Despite the tension, I never stopped yearning for my father's approval and a more genuine connection with my family. Every year, I would arrange my schedule to join the family vacation, hoping this would be the time Dad would finally see me as an accomplished adult, worthy of respect, rather than a rebellious child who needed to be put in his place. This year's planned trip to Hawaii would be our most ambitious family vacation yet, and I was determined to make it a turning point in our relationship. The planning for our annual family vacation began as it always did, with a group text from my mom in January. "Happy New Year, everyone. Time to start thinking about our summer getaway. Your father and I are thinking Hawaii this year. What do you all think?" The group chat exploded with excitement. My sister Jessica sent a flurry of beach and palm tree emojis. OMG. Yes, I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. My brother Mark was more reserved, but clearly on board. Sounds good to me. Sarah and the kids will love it. I felt that familiar mix of excitement and apprehension, but responded enthusiastically. Great choice. I can help with recommendations for activities and restaurants. Over the next few weeks, our family chat was filled with ideas and suggestions. Mom wanted to visit Pearl Harbor and take a luau. Jessica was researching the best beaches and snorkeling spots. Mark was concerned about keeping his 3 kids entertained. Dad, as usual, remained mostly silent in the group chat, occasionally chiming in with practical questions about flight times and weather conditions. I took the initiative to research accommodations, knowing this would be a more expensive trip than our usual vacations. After comparing options, I found a beautiful beachfront property on Maui with enough space for all 11 of us. My parents, Mark, and his family of 5, Jessica and her boyfriend and me. The property had direct beach access, a private pool, and was within walking distance of restaurants and shops. It seemed perfect, but when I shared the link with the family, the response was immediate. "Dalton, did you see the price tag on this place?" Mark messaged privately. "Dad's going to have a coronary." He wasn't wrong. When I revealed that the venue would cost $7,800 for the week, the group chat went silent for several hours. Finally, Dad broke the silence with his characteristic bluntness. "Too expensive. We need to find something more reasonable." The search continued, but every alternative property was either too small, too far from the beach, or had some other significant drawback. As the weeks passed, I could sense the excitement waning, replaced by stress over the logistics and cost. During a family dinner at my parents' house, Mom confided that Dad was considering canceling the Hawaii plan altogether and suggesting a road trip instead. That night I made a decision. I had just closed a successful development deal and received a substantial bonus. The $7,800 for the venue rental was well within my means, and I wanted to contribute to a memorable family experience. The next morning I called the property manager and paid the full amount, then sent a message to the family group. "Good news, everyone. I've taken care of the accommodations. Consider it my treat this year." The responses varied widely. Jessica was effusive with gratitude. "Dalton, you're amazing. Thank you so much." Mom sent a private message expressing both thanks and concern. "That's incredibly generous, sweetheart, but are you sure? It's a lot of money." Mark's response was brief. "Thanks, bro. We appreciate it." Dad did not respond in the group chat at all. Later that day, Mom called me. "Your father is a bit upset," she said quietly. "You know how he is about being the provider." "Mom, I'm not trying to step on his toes," I explained. "I just wanted to help make this special trip happen for everyone." "I know that, honey," she sighed. "And deep down, I think he does too. He's just proud. Maybe give him a call." I did call, but the conversation was strained. Dad thanked me in a tone that suggested anything but gratitude, then quickly changed the subject to Mark's recent promotion. The call ended with an uncomfortable silence when I mentioned looking forward to Hawaii. As the trip date approached, I noticed Dad becoming increasingly distant in our communications. In the family group chat, he would ignore my messages or respond only to others. During a video call to discuss activities, he spoke over me repeatedly when I suggested itinerary ideas. These were small slights, easy to dismiss individually, but together they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. The tension came to a head during a family dinner at my parents' house 1 week before our departure date. As we gathered around the dining table, the conversation initially revolved around logistics: who would rent cars, how we would split up for various activities, what everyone wanted to see most. The atmosphere was light and excited, until Dad began distributing printed itineraries he had created. "I've mapped out each day," he announced proudly. "I've researched the best routes to maximize our time." I noticed immediately that several of the activities I had specifically mentioned wanting to do were not included. When I pointed this out, Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Those tourist traps are overrated and overpriced," he said. "I've planned better alternatives." I felt a familiar frustration rising but tried to keep my tone light. "Dad, I've actually been to Maui before for a business trip. The botanical garden tour is really spectacular, and I think everyone would enjoy it." Dad's face darkened. "If I wanted advice from a travel agent, I'd hire one," he snapped. "This isn't one of your business deals where you get to call all the shots, Dalton." The table fell silent. Mom placed her hand on Dad's arm, but he shrugged it off. "I was just making a suggestion," I said carefully. "Since I'm paying for the venue, I thought I might have some input on the activities." And that's when everything exploded. The dining room of my parents' house had always been the stage for our family's most significant moments. The oak table, where we now sat, had witnessed birthday celebrations, holiday feasts, and countless Sunday dinners. But that night, as the early summer sunset cast long shadows through the windows, it became the battleground for a confrontation that had been brewing for years. The room itself was a testament to my parents' practical traditional tastes. Framed family photos lined the walls, cataloging our growth through awkward school pictures and posed vacation snapshots. The china cabinet displayed my mother's prized collection of porcelain figurines, alongside the good dishes that only emerged for special occasions. The familiar setting made what was about to happen even more jarring. The tension had been building throughout the meal. Dad had been making subtle digs about my career and lifestyle all evening. "Must be nice to sit in an office all day." While other people do the real work, he commented when I mentioned a challenging project. When I described a new sustainable building material my company was using, he interrupted with, "All that fancy green stuff just drives up costs for regular folks." Each remark was delivered with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mom tried to steer the conversation to safer topics, asking Jessica about her nursing job and Mark about his kids' baseball games. But Dad kept finding ways to circle back to what he clearly saw as my shortcomings. The undercurrent of resentment was palpable, making the homemade lasagna taste like cardboard in my mouth. When I mentioned my input on the Hawaii activities, suggesting the botanical garden tour, I could see something shift in my father's expression. His face flushed, and the vein in his forehead, the one that had signaled danger throughout my childhood, began to pulse visibly. "You think because you're throwing around your money you get to take over?" he demanded, his voice rising. "This is a family vacation. Our family vacation. One that worked just fine before you decided to play big shot." Mark looked down at his plate. Jessica shot me a warning glance. Mom placed her hand on Dad's arm, murmuring, "Richard, please." "It's not about taking over," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "I just thought, since I'm contributing financially, I could also contribute ideas." Dad slammed his palm on the table, making the silverware jump. "Contributing? You're showing off, plain and simple. Trying to make the rest of us feel small because we don't have fancy jobs and expense accounts." "That's not fair," I countered, feeling heat rise in my own face. "I'm trying to do something nice for the family." "We don't need your charity," Dad spat. "We managed just fine before you started making your so-called big money, and we'll manage just fine now." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the antique wall clock, a wedding gift to my parents, 35 years ago. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "So, what are you saying?" I asked finally. "That my money is welcome, but I'm not." Dad's eyes narrowed. When he spoke, his voice was cold and deliberate. "What I'm saying is, skip the family vacation. It's not your place anymore. We'll figure out another way to pay for the venue." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mom gasped softly. Jessica whispered, "Dad, no." Mark looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, his loyalty to Dad preventing him from speaking up. I felt as though I'd been punched in the stomach. All the air seemed to leave my lungs at once. This was far from the first time my father had dismissed or belittled me, but never had he so explicitly rejected me from the family unit. In that moment, the years of seeking his approval, of trying to bridge the gap between us, despite our differences, felt like a fool's errand. I maintained a calm exterior. Years of business negotiations having taught me the value of not revealing when you're wounded. But inside, I was reeling. The familiar feeling of not being good enough, of somehow always disappointing him, no matter what I achieved, washed over me like a toxic wave. "I see," I said quietly, folding my napkin and placing it beside my half-eaten meal. "If that's how you feel, I'll respect your wishes." Mom started to protest, but I stood up from the table. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was delicious, as always." I kissed her cheek, nodded to my siblings, and walked out without looking at my father again. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I had to remind myself to breathe. By the time I reached home, the initial shock had given way to a simmering anger. Not just at tonight's events, but at the pattern they represented. A pattern that had shaped our relationship for as long as I could remember. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in the darkness of my living room, the city lights twinkling below my 20th floor window. As I sipped the amber liquid, a clarity began to emerge from the emotional chaos. My father had explicitly uninvited me from the family vacation, but he still expected to use my money. The irony was almost laughable. In that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to play the dutiful son anymore, always giving and never receiving the respect I deserved in return. I pulled out my phone and navigated to the email confirmation from the venue rental. The cancellation policy stated that, with 1 week's notice, I would receive a full refund. My finger hovered over the contact host button. Part of me felt petty, vindictive even. Was I really going to potentially ruin the family vacation? Over hurt feelings? But another voice, stronger and more certain, reminded me that this wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect. About finally setting a boundary after years of allowing myself to be diminished. I composed a polite email to the property manager, explaining that I needed to cancel the reservation and requesting the refund be processed to my credit card. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and finished my whiskey in silence. For the first time in years, I felt no guilt about disappointing my father. He had made his choice, and now I had made mine. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up with that peculiar clarity that sometimes follows difficult decisions. The anger had subsided, replaced by a strange sense of calm. I had acted decisively, and while I wasn't entirely comfortable with the potential fallout, I knew I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. My first call was to the resort in Hawaii. The cheerful reservations manager, Tracy, initially tried to persuade me to reconsider. "Mr. Reynolds, we were so looking forward to hosting your family. Is there anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable instead?" When I politely insisted, her tone shifted to professional sympathy. "I understand. These things happen. You'll receive a confirmation email shortly, and the refund should appear on your card within 3 to 5 business days." As I ended the call, a complex mix of emotions washed over me. Relief that the process had been straightforward. Satisfaction at taking action rather than simply absorbing the hurt as I had so many times before. But also a deep sadness at what this represented, another fracture in an already damaged family relationship. I made coffee and carried it out to my balcony, looking out over the Seattle skyline. The city was already humming with morning activity. People rushing to jobs, school appointments, lives that continued, regardless of personal dramas. It was strangely comforting to be reminded that my family conflict, which felt all-consuming to me, was just one tiny story in a world full of them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Hey, are you okay?" Last night was intense. I appreciated her concern, but wasn't ready to discuss everything via text. "I'm fine. Just needed some space to think." "Dad was out of line," she wrote back. "Mom's really upset. Call when you can." I promised I would, then silenced my phone again. I needed more time to process before engaging with the family fallout. As the day progressed, I tried to focus on work, reviewing plans for a new development, and taking conference calls. But my mind kept drifting back to previous family conflicts, a pattern that had repeated throughout my life, with variations but always the same core dynamic. I remembered my high school graduation, when Dad had dismissed my scholarship to a prestigious business school as fancy paper that won't teach you how the real world works. The Christmas I brought home my first big bonus check and offered to pay for a family cruise, only to have Dad suggest I was showing off and trying to make the rest of us feel bad. The time I helped Mark with a down payment on his house, and Dad had somehow turned it into a criticism of my flashy lifestyle rather than acknowledging my generosity. Each memory reinforced that my decision to withdraw the payment wasn't just about last night's insult. It was about a lifetime of having my accomplishments minimized, my contributions devalued, and my place in the family defined entirely on my father's terms. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mark, and I could tell from his tone that he had heard about the cancellation. "What the hell, Dalton?" he demanded, without preamble. "You canceled the reservation over one fight." "It wasn't just one fight, Mark," I replied calmly. "Dad explicitly told me I'm not welcome on the family vacation. Why would I still pay for it?" He was angry. You know how he gets. He didn't mean it literally. Didn't he? He's been pushing me away for years. Last night he just finally said out loud what he's been demonstrating all along. Mark's voice softened slightly. "Look, I get that you and Dad butt heads, but pulling the financial rug out from under the whole family is pretty extreme. My kids have been looking forward to this trip for months. The guilt trip might have worked in the past, but not today. I'm sorry the kids are disappointed. I truly am. But this isn't about them. It's about respect. And Dad made it very clear he has none for me. So that's it. You're just out. For now, yes. I need some distance." After we hung up, I turned off my phone completely. I knew there would be more calls, more texts, more attempts to make me feel guilty or selfish. I wasn't ready to defend myself further, not yet. That evening, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant and opened a bottle of wine. As I ate alone at my dining table, I realized this was the first time in my adult life that I had truly stood up to my father in a meaningful way. It wasn't a shouting match or a temporary disagreement that would be smoothed over with half-hearted apologies. It was a line drawn in the sand, a statement that his treatment of me had consequences. The realization was both empowering and terrifying. I had no roadmap for what came next, no idea how this would reshape our family dynamics long term. All I knew was that something had fundamentally changed, and there was no going back to the status quo. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams filled with fragmented images of family vacations past my father's disappointed face, the Hawaiian beach we would never visit together. When I finally gave up on sleep around 5:30 in the morning, I turned my phone back on, curious despite myself about the family reaction. The screen lit up immediately with notifications. 51 missed calls, 38 text messages, 17 voicemails, and one email forwarded from my mother with the subject line, "Urgent reservation canceled due to payment failure." It seemed the resort had wasted no time notifying the primary contact, my father, about the cancellation. The digital avalanche on my phone suggested the news had not been well received. I scrolled through the texts first. They progressed from confused, "What's going on with the reservation?" to concerned. "Please call ASAP. There's an issue with the booking," to angry. "You can't do this to the family," to desperate. "Please call. We need to fix this." The voicemails told a similar story. My father's messages started with cold fury. "Call me immediately. We need to discuss what you've done," then moved to thinly veiled threats. "You're making a huge mistake that you'll regret," and finally, to something approaching desperation. "Dalton, please. We need to talk about this. The family needs this vacation. The family needs this vacation." I sat on the edge of my bed, absorbing it all. The sheer volume of the response suggested I had struck a nerve far deeper than I'd anticipated. This wasn't just about a canceled vacation or $7,800. It was about power dynamics that had been established over decades suddenly and dramatically shifted. As the morning light filtered through my blinds, I felt no triumph or vindication, only a sad certainty that this confrontation had been inevitable. The question now was what to do next. Did I re-engage immediately? Set terms for moving forward? Or give everyone, including myself, more time to process what had happened? I decided to shower and have breakfast before making any decisions. As the hot water washed over me, I found myself thinking about something my first mentor in real estate had told me. In business and in life, people will treat you how you teach them to treat you. For too long, I had taught my father that he could dismiss and diminish me without consequences. Perhaps it was finally time for a new lesson. The forwarded email from my mother sat in my inbox like a ticking bomb. The subject line, "Urgent reservation canceled due to payment failure," was rendered in all capital letters, giving it an air of panic that seemed almost comical in contrast to the professionally worded content inside. Dear Mr. Reynolds. The email began addressed to my father. We regret to inform you that the payment for your upcoming reservation at our Maui Beach villa has been withdrawn by the cardholder. As per our policy, without a confirmed payment, we cannot hold your reservation. Your booking for June 10th through June 17th has been canceled. The property is now available for rebooking, and given our high season demand, it may be reserved by another party quickly. If you wish to reinstate your reservation, please contact our office immediately with alternative payment arrangements. The message was polite, but final. There was no judgment, no acknowledgement of the family drama behind the cancellation, just the matter-of-fact reality that no payment meant no reservation. Below the forwarded email, my mother had added a brief note of her own. Dalton, I don't know what's going on, but your father is beside himself. Please call home as soon as you can. Love, Mom. I could imagine the scene at my parents' house when this email arrived. Dad would have been checking his inbox over morning coffee, perhaps already mentally packing for the trip, when this bombshell landed. His face would have flushed with that particular shade of red reserved for moments when he felt his authority was being challenged. He would have called for my mother, thrust the screen in her face, and begun pacing the kitchen, working himself into a state that was part fury, part panic. I scrolled through more messages. There were texts from extended family members apparently now drawn into the drama. My Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, had sent a disapproving message. Family should come first, Dalton. Very disappointed in your behavior. My cousin Steve, on the other hand, had texted, don't know what's going on, but knowing Uncle Richard, he probably deserved it. Stay strong. The family was taking sides, drawing battle lines in a conflict that had been brewing beneath the surface for years, but had now erupted into the open. It was exactly the kind of messy public family drama I had always worked to avoid, preferring to swallow my hurt rather than create waves. But there was no going back now. My phone rang again. Jessica. I took a deep breath and answered. Dalton, she said, her voice tight with emotion. What the hell is happening? Mom and Dad's house is like a war room right now. Dad told me to skip the family vacation, I replied simply. So I did. And I took my money with me. He didn't mean it literally, she protested, echoing Mark's words from yesterday. You know how he gets when he's angry. He says things he doesn't mean. Does he? Or do we just tell ourselves that to excuse his behavior? The question hung between us. Jess, I'm tired of being the family punching bag. I'm tired of having my contributions valued only when they're financial, and even then treated like they're somehow tainted because I made my money in a way Dad doesn't respect. She was quiet for a moment. I get it, she finally said. I do. But this is affecting everyone, not just Dad. Mom's upset, Mark's kids are crying, and now there are all these family members weighing in with their opinions. I'm sorry about that, I said, and I meant it. But I didn't create this situation. Dad did. When he explicitly uninvited me from a vacation he still expected me to pay for. Will you at least talk to him? He's been trying to call you all morning. I considered this. Not yet. I need more time. And honestly, I'm not sure what there is to say. After we hung up, I made myself another cup of coffee and tried to focus on work emails. But my concentration was shattered when my doorbell rang around 11. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica standing in the hallway looking tired and determined. I opened the door. That was fast. I thought you were in Chicago. I caught the first flight out this morning, she said, stepping inside. Someone needed to talk to you face to face. My apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor always made Jessica uncomfortable. She called it my fancy fishbowl. But today, she seemed too preoccupied to notice the surroundings, pacing the living room with nervous energy. You don't understand what's happening back home, she said. Dad is falling apart. Not just angry Dalton. Scared. Scared of what? Having to pay for his own vacation. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. Scared of losing face. Scared of admitting he can't afford this trip and never could. That stopped me. What are you talking about? Dad's always been financially stable. Jessica sank onto my leather sofa. Things have changed. The hardware chain was bought out last year. Dad's position was downgraded, his salary cut. He's been too proud to tell anyone working overtime to try to make up the difference. And Mark's store is one of the locations they're considering closing. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why didn't anyone tell me? Would Dad ever admit something like that to you? The son who ignored his advice and became successful on his own terms? It would feel like confirming everything he feared, that his way of life is becoming obsolete. I sat down heavily beside her. So, the Hawaii trip was already a financial stretch they couldn't really afford. When you offered to pay for the venue, it was both a relief and a humiliation for him. Every time you pick up a check or offer financial help, it's a reminder to Dad that he's not the provider he once was. The pieces began to fall into place. Dad's increased hostility over the past year, the barbed comments about my career, his extreme reaction to my input on vacation planning. It wasn't just about control or his usual stubbornness. It was about a man watching his identity crumble and lashing out at the most convenient target. That doesn't excuse how he treated me, I said finally. No, it doesn't, Jessica agreed. Dad has always been hard on you, and that's not right. But maybe understanding where it's coming from can help you decide what to do next. As Jessica left, promising to let the family know I was thinking things through, I found myself in a state of emotional confusion. The satisfaction I had felt at finally standing up for myself was now complicated by this new information. My father wasn't just being controlling and dismissive. He was a proud man facing the collapse of his self-image as the family provider. Part of me felt sympathy for him. Another part remained angry that he would take his insecurities out on me rather than being honest about the situation. And still another part recognized that this moment represented a potential turning point in our relationship, a chance to break old patterns and perhaps build something healthier. I spent the afternoon contemplating my next move. By evening, I had made my decision. I composed a short message to the family group chat, the first communication I had initiated since walking out of my parents' house 2 nights ago. Your words have consequences. Enjoy your vacation without me. It wasn't quite forgiveness, nor was it a permanent door slamming. It was a boundary, clearly stated. The ball was now in their court. Within minutes, my phone exploded with responses. Mom, please, Dalton, we need to talk about this as a family. Mark, you're really going to punish the whole family over this. Jessica, call me. And finally, from Dad family meeting, our house, tomorrow at 6, be there. It wasn't an apology or even a request. It was a command delivered in his typical style. But the fact that he was calling for a meeting rather than simply continuing to leave angry voicemails suggested he recognized the gravity of the situation. I texted back a single word. Okay. Whatever happened next, it was clear that the dynamics of our family had shifted irrevocably. The question was whether we would emerge stronger for it, or if the cracks that had been exposed would widen into permanent rifts. The drive to my parents' house the next evening felt like a journey into the past. Each familiar landmark triggered memories: the park where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, the high school where he had attended exactly 2 of my debate competitions, the ice cream shop, where we would stop on rare good days when he was proud of something I'd done. Chicago's summer evening light cast a golden glow over everything, creating a nostalgic filter that made even the most ordinary scenes look like memories already. I arrived precisely at 6, neither early enough to suggest eagerness nor late enough to appear disrespectful. Mom answered the door, pulling me into a tight hug that conveyed both relief and anxiety. Thank you for coming, she whispered, before leading me into the living room. The atmosphere inside was tense, the air heavy, with unspoken words. Dad sat in his usual armchair, looking older and more tired than I remembered from just days ago. Mark and Jessica were already there, occupying opposite ends of the sofa. Mark's expression was guarded, Jessica's encouraging. They had clearly chosen their positions in this family drama, both physically and metaphorically. Dalton Dad acknowledged my presence with a nod but didn't rise from his chair. Even now he was maintaining the posture of authority, the father waiting for the prodigal son to make amends. Mom gestured for me to take the remaining seat, a wooden chair brought in from the dining room. It felt symbolic somehow, being the only one not seated comfortably, the outsider brought in for judgment. "We're here to discuss the vacation situation." Dad began, his tone formal. "Your actions have created a significant problem for the entire family." I noticed he was avoiding direct eye contact, staring instead at a point somewhere above my head. This was typical of how he handled confrontation, maintaining distance, even in close quarters. "My actions," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "Dad, you explicitly told me to skip the family vacation. You said, and I quote, 'It's not your place anymore.' What exactly did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to act like an adult, not throw a tantrum by canceling the reservation without discussing it with anyone," he shot back. Richard, Mom interjected softly. "We agreed to listen first." Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded tersely. I took a deep breath. "I'm 34 years old. I run a successful business. I've been supporting myself entirely since college, which I paid for myself after you refused to help. I've consistently shown up for this family emotionally and financially. And in return, I've received criticism, dismissal, and most recently, explicit exclusion. So yes, I withdrew my financial support after being told I wasn't welcome. That's not a tantrum, Dad. That's self-respect." The room fell silent. Jessica looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad cleared his throat. "Fine. I apologize for what I said. It was spoken in anger. Now, can we please resolve the practical matter? The reservation needs to be reinstated, and the payment made again." It was a classic Richard Reynolds non-apology, offered not out of genuine remorse, but as a transaction to get what he wanted. In the past, I would have accepted it, grateful for even this minimal acknowledgement. But not today. "That's not good enough," I said quietly. "For years, I've accepted your dismissal of my choices, your minimizing of my accomplishments, your subtle and not so subtle put-downs. I've told myself it was just your way, that you didn't mean it, that maintaining family peace was worth swallowing my pride. But I can't do it anymore." Dad's face flushed. "So what do you want? A parade. Every time you walk in the door, special treatment, because you make more money than the rest of us now." "No," I said firmly. "I want basic respect. I want acknowledgement that my path, though different from yours, has value. I want to be treated like an equal adult member of this family, not a perpetual disappointment." Jessica spoke up. "Dad, Dalton's right. You've always been harder on him than on any of us. Even when he succeeds, you find ways to make it seem like it doesn't count." Mark surprised me by adding, "She's not wrong, Dad. I've noticed it too." Dad looked between his children, bewildered, as if they were speaking a language he didn't understand. "I've always wanted what's best for all of you. I pushed Dalton because I saw potential in him." "No," Mom said, her quiet voice somehow the most powerful in the room. "You pushed Dalton because he reminded you of the part of yourself you never had the courage to explore. The part that wanted more than the safe, practical path you chose." We all stared at her in shock. In 35 years of marriage, I had never heard my mother speak to my father this way. Dad's expression crumpled the authoritative facade, giving way to something raw and vulnerable. "Is that what you all think of me? That I'm just a bitter old man, punishing my son for having the courage I lacked?" No one answered immediately. The question hung in the air, too honest to be dismissed, too painful to be addressed directly. Finally, I broke the silence. "I think you're a man who worked incredibly hard to provide for his family, who sacrificed your own dreams to give us stability and opportunity. And I think somewhere along the way, watching me take risks and succeed at them became painful for you." Dad's eyes met mine for the first time that evening. "Jessica told you about the job situation?" "Yes." "Then you know I'm not exactly in a position to judge anyone's career choices right now," he said with a bitter laugh. "The company I gave 30 years to demoted me like I was nothing. All that loyalty, all those sacrificed weekends and holidays, and in the end, it meant nothing to them." The anger in his voice couldn't fully mask the hurt and fear beneath it. For perhaps the first time I saw my father, not as the intimidating authority figure of my childhood, but as a man facing his own vulnerabilities and failures. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said sincerely. "I wish you had felt you could tell me. And admit that your old man's way of doing things doesn't work anymore. That maybe your way with your education and your innovations was right all along. He shook his head. My pride wouldn't allow it. This isn't about who was right, Dad. Different approaches work for different times and different people. Your way worked for you for decades. That's not nothing. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher in how to be stubborn, I replied with a small smile. The rest I figured out on my own. The tension in the room had transformed from hostile to melancholy, a shared recognition of patterns too long established and hurts too long unaddressed. So, where does this leave us? Mark asked always. The practical one. The vacation is in less than a week, and the reservation is gone. Actually, I said I called the resort this morning. The property is still available. I didn't rebook it yet because I wanted to have this conversation first. Dad looked up sharply. You mean we could still go? If that's what everyone wants, I said carefully. But things would need to be different. I'm not just a checkbook dad. If I'm paying for the venue, I get a say in the planning. And more importantly, I need to know that you respect me as an adult, even when we disagree. He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he did something that shocked me. He stood up, walked over to my chair, and extended his hand. I respect you, son, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I haven't shown it well, but I do, and I'd be honored if you'd join us for the family vacation. As an equal. As the man you've become, not the boy I sometimes still see. I stood and took his hand, which turned into an awkward but genuine embrace. Over his shoulder I could see Mom wiping away tears and Jessica giving me a thumbs up. The vacation was back on, but more importantly, a new chapter in our family story had begun. One where old wounds could finally start to heal, and new healthier patterns might take root. The Hawaiian vacation was rescheduled for late July, giving us all time to process what had happened and establish a new foundation for moving forward. The delay turned out to be a blessing, allowing the raw emotions to settle and creating space for more honest conversations than our family had ever experienced before. The new reservation was made jointly with Dad and I sitting side by side at my parents' kitchen table, both our names on the booking. It was a small gesture, but symbolically important, acknowledging our shared investment in the family's experience. We chose the same beachfront property I had originally booked, but this time, we reviewed the amenities together, with Dad asking questions rather than dismissing my suggestions outright. The private pool seems like an unnecessary expense, he commented, old habits briefly resurfacing. I waited, giving him space to catch himself. After a moment, he added, but I suppose the kids would enjoy it, and it would give us more flexibility than always going to the beach. What do you think? It was a small victory, this asking of my opinion, rather than delivering a verdict. I think it's worth it, I replied, and I'm happy to cover that portion of the cost. Planning the trip became a family affair with weekly video calls where everyone contributed ideas. Dad still created his beloved itineraries, but now they incorporated everyone's input, including mine. The botanical garden tour I had suggested was added to the schedule alongside Dad's preferred historical sites and Mom's request for a sunset dinner cruise. During this planning period, other changes were happening within our family dynamic. Dad, at Mom's insistence, had started seeing a therapist to work through his issues with control and his struggles adjusting to his changed work status. He didn't talk about the sessions much, but I could see small differences in how he communicated, pausing more before responding, making efforts to phrase criticisms as questions or suggestions. Mark and I began having regular lunch meetings to discuss how we might collaborate professionally. His extensive knowledge of hardware retail operations complemented my real estate development expertise, and we were exploring the possibility of a joint venture creating eco-friendly home improvement stores. These meetings served a dual purpose, strengthening our brotherly bond, while potentially creating a new career path for Mark if his current store location closed. Jessica, always the family mediator, found herself suddenly unburdened of that role, as Dad and I learned to communicate directly. She confessed during one of our phone calls that she felt both relieved and slightly disoriented. It's weird not having to translate between you two, she laughed. I might need to find a new family identity. Mom perhaps underwent the most profound transformation. Having finally spoken her truth after decades of peacekeeping, she seemed to stand taller voice, her opinions more readily, and engage with Dad as a true partner, rather than a supporting character in his life. They were attending couples, counseling together, working to rebuild their relationship on more equal footing. As for me, I experienced a gradual unwinding of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The constant background anxiety of family interactions diminished as I no longer braced for criticism or dismissal. I found myself looking forward to our weekly planning calls rather than dreading them, able to share my genuine enthusiasm without fear of it being mocked or minimized. When July finally arrived, and we gathered at the Chicago airport for our flight to Maui, there was an unfamiliar ease to our interactions. Not perfect harmony, certainly, but a new willingness to navigate differences without retreating to old patterns. The vacation itself was transformative. The property was everything the listing had promised: a spacious beachfront villa with breathtaking views, comfortable accommodations for all 11 of us, and that private pool that proved its worth during the hot afternoons, when the younger children needed a break from the sun and sand. More meaningful than the setting, however, were the moments of connection that would have been impossible under our old family dynamic. Dad and I sharing a quiet sunrise coffee on the lanai, discussing business challenges with mutual respect. The afternoon I taught him to snorkel, his initial reluctance giving way to childlike wonder at the underwater world. The evening he actually asked about my current projects and listened. Really listened to my response. We established new traditions alongside the old. The family photo session on the beach continued, but now included silly poses alongside the formal ones. The mandatory group activities remained, but were balanced with free time for individual pursuits. And perhaps most significantly, the evening meals became forums for real conversation rather than Dad's monologues, with everyone taking turns sharing thoughts or stories from their day. On our final night in Hawaii, as we gathered for a barbecue on the villa's patio, Dad surprised everyone by raising his glass in a toast. To family, he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, to growth and second chances, and to my son Dalton, who had the courage to show me that respect has to be earned, not demanded. Thank you for not giving up on this, old man. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. Not because I needed his validation anymore, but because it represented how far we had both come in just a few short months. Later that evening, as the party wound down and people drifted off to pack for our return flight, Dad pulled me aside. "You know," he said, gazing out at the moonlit ocean, "when you canceled that reservation, it was the first time in your life you'd ever really stood up to me. Really forced me to face the consequences of how I treated you." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "The best lessons rarely are," he replied. "I spent so many years trying to mold you into a version of me that I miss seeing the remarkable man you were becoming on your own terms. I'm trying to make up for that now. We can't change the past, Dad, but we get to decide what happens next." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wisdom I'm still learning." As we flew back to Chicago the next day, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. What had begun as a painful rejection had become the catalyst for healing long-festering wounds. By finally refusing to accept disrespect, I had created space for something healthier to grow. The lesson wasn't that family relationships should be transactional or that financial leverage should be used to demand respect. Rather, it was that true connection can only exist where there is mutual respect, honest communication, and a willingness to see each other as we truly are, not as we wish each other to be. In the months since that pivotal Hawaii trip, our family continues to evolve. There are still occasional tensions, moments when old habits threaten to resurface. But now we have new tools and a shared commitment to working through conflicts rather than burying them beneath surface harmony. I've learned that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean cutting ties or burning bridges. Sometimes it creates the necessary disruption for genuine change to occur. And I've discovered that forgiveness isn't about forgetting past hurts, but about choosing to build something new despite them. If you've ever struggled with family dynamics that diminish your worth, know that you deserve respect. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships to flourish. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable for how they treat you. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member to gain their respect? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Thank you for listening. And remember, self-respect is never selfish. It's the foundation upon which all healthy relationships are built.